Welcome to Ghost Files, where every whisper hides a secret, and every story could be real. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because you never know which story might be waiting for you next. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready, because tonight's story might follow you, even after it ends. The patient in room 114. Location: Regional Medical Center, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 2019. Diane Mercer was 34 years old and had been a registered nurse for 9 years when the events of this story happened. She had worked night shift for 6 of those 9 years, not because she had no choice, but because she genuinely preferred it. She preferred the relative quiet of 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., the smaller staff, the sense that the work was more focused and less performative than days. Night shift nurses, she always said, were a specific kind of person, self-sufficient, comfortable with silence, at ease in the particular atmosphere of a hospital when most of its population was asleep. She worked the medical surgical floor at a regional medical center in Tulsa. The floor had 28 beds arranged in a horseshoe shape around a central nursing station, a standard layout she could walk in her sleep, which she occasionally nearly did around 4 a.m. on long stretches. She knew every supply cabinet, every call light pattern, every sound the floor made at 3 in the morning. She knew the difference between a patient shifting in bed and a patient in distress. She knew when something was wrong before the monitors told her. She was not a person who scared easily. She had seen people die and helped them go peacefully, and sat with families in the worst moments of their lives, and driven home in the early morning gray, and eaten breakfast, and slept, and come back and done it again. The work had given her a specific and hard-won relationship with fear. She felt it when she needed to, and set it aside when she needed to. And she was very good at knowing the difference. Room 114 had been empty for 3 days when Diane noticed it. The room was at the far end of the horseshoe, the last room before the hallway turned and ran back toward the service elevator. Standard semi-private room, currently unoccupied with both beds made and empty. The door usually left half open, as was standard for unoccupied rooms, so staff could see in without entering. Diane walked past it at the beginning of every shift during her initial hall check, and at regular intervals throughout the night. She noticed it on a Tuesday night in early November. She was doing her 2 a.m. check, walking the hall quietly, glancing into rooms, confirming that the patients she could see were in the positions consistent with sleep and not distress. When she reached room 114 and looked through the half-open door, she stopped. The bed nearest the door bed, A, had an impression in it. The blanket was not turned down. No pillow was displaced. The room looked in every other way exactly as an unoccupied room should look. But the mattress had a visible depression in it, the shape and depth of a person lying on their back, as if someone had been lying there for long enough to compress the foam. She stood in the doorway for a moment. She thought housekeeping had perhaps sat on the bed while cleaning earlier in the evening, and the impression had not recovered. She thought the mattress might be old and developing a permanent depression. She went in, smoothed the blanket over the mattress, checked the bathroom empty, and left. At 4 a.m., she walked past room 114 again. The impression was back. Same location, same shape, same depth. The blanket she had smoothed was undisturbed, but the depression beneath it was clear in the low light from the hallway. She stood in the doorway for a longer moment this time. She looked at the second bed B, which was undisturbed. She looked at the bathroom door open, dark inside, as she had left it. She stepped into the room and stood still and listened. The room had the particular quality that empty hospital rooms have at night, a quality she had always found difficult to describe, something between stillness and held breath. She checked the bathroom again. Empty, She ran her hand over the mattress depression. The foam was warm. She walked quickly back to the nursing station and told her colleague Priya what she had found. Priya was a 5-year night shift veteran with a healthy skepticism for anything she could not directly observe. She walked down the hall with Diane and looked at the room. She looked at the mattress. She looked at the bathroom. She said it was probably a mattress issue and they should flag it for housekeeping in the morning. Diane agreed. They went back to the station. At 6:15 a.m., 45 minutes before shift change, Diane did her final hall check. She reached room 114 and looked in. The impression was there again. She went in. The foam was warm again. She stood in the room for a full minute this time, in the early gray light beginning to come through the window, and she looked at the shape of the depression carefully. It was not the shape of a person sitting on a mattress. It was the shape of a person lying in a specific position, arms at the sides, head centered, feet together. The shape of a person lying the way people lie when they are placed rather than when they choose to lie down. The shape, she thought, and then tried not to think, of a person lying the way people lie when they are no longer alive. She filed a maintenance request for the mattress that morning and mentioned the room to the day charge nurse without going into detail. The mattress was replaced that week. Diane checked the new mattress on her next several shifts. No impression. She thought that was the end of it. 3 weeks later, a patient was admitted to room 114, an elderly man named Gerald, recovering from hip replacement surgery, pleasant and alert and sleeping well. Diane did her standard checks on him throughout the first night without incident. She checked him at 2 a.m. He was asleep, breathing normally, monitors steady. At 3:40 a.m. his call light came on. She walked to room 114 and pushed the door open. Gerald was awake, sitting up in bed, which was unusual for a post-surgical patient his age at 3:40 in the morning. He looked at her, and his expression was not the expression of someone in pain or confusion. It was the expression of someone who wanted to tell her something specific. He told her there was someone in the other bed. Bed B, the bed that had been empty since his admission, was unoccupied, blanket neat, exactly as it should be. Diane told him there was no one in the other bed. Gerald looked at her patiently and said he knew that now, but there had been someone there when he woke up. He said it was a person lying very still in the other bed, facing the ceiling. He said he had looked at the person for a while before pressing the call light, and when he pressed the call light, the person was no longer there. Diane asked him to describe the person. He said it was difficult. He said the person looked, and here he paused for a long moment before choosing the word unfinished. He said it was a person who looked the way a reflection looks, room 114. The day charge nurse looked at her for a moment and then said the room had had a high mortality rate over the previous 3 years, more patient deaths than any other room on the floor, which statistically might mean nothing because death distribution on a medical floor is not uniform, but was notable enough that some of the day staff had mentioned it. She also told Diane that the room had previously been a different numbered room before a renumbering of the floor 2 years earlier. In its previous numbering, it had been room 108. And room 108 had been where a patient had died under circumstances that had prompted a formal review. Not a suspicious death, but a death in which the patient had been found in the morning in a position inconsistent with how they had been positioned at the last check. The review had concluded it was a documentation issue. Diane transferred off that floor 6 months later. She works in an outpatient clinic, now day shifts, no overnight stays, patients who go home at 5 p.m. She says she does not miss inpatient nursing, and she is careful when she says it to mean something very specific. She does not miss the particular experience of being the only person awake on a floor at 3 a.m., knowing that whatever else was happening in that building, she was the one who would find it first. She has told the Room 114 story many times. The response she gets most often is a practical explanation: mattress compression, Gerald's post-surgical disorientation, the natural pattern seeking of a tired mind at 4 in the morning. She agrees with all of those explanations. She agrees they are possible. She agrees they are probably correct. She just cannot fully account for the warmth. The specific, repeating, unexplained warmth of a mattress in an empty room at 4 in the morning. And she cannot fully account for Gerald's word: unfinished. She has turned that word over many times in the years since. She has tried to understand what an 80-year-old man who had just come through surgery would mean when he looked at the person in the other bed and reached for that word specifically. What quality of a human being makes them look unfinished? What is present in a person that, when it is absent, makes them look like a reflection rather than a real thing? She thinks she knows. She has thought about it long enough that she thinks she knows. She just doesn't like the answer. The convenience store at the end of Route 7. Location: 24-hour convenience store, rural Vermont, 2020. Noah Castillo was 23 years old, a year out of college, working a 24-hour convenience store on Route 7 in rural Vermont, while he figured out what to do with his English degree and his ambition to eventually write something worth reading. The overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., paid $1.50 more per hour than days, and came with long stretches of quiet that he used to read and write in a notebook he kept behind the register. It was not glamorous, but it suited him, and he had been doing it for 8 months without any real difficulty. The store was small, a standard convenience layout with 4 aisles, a cooler wall, a hot food station that he turned off at midnight, a single bathroom behind the stockroom, and large windows across the front that looked out onto the parking lot and the 2-lane road beyond. At night, the windows were a source of both comfort and unease. He could see out clearly, but the interior light meant anyone outside could see in just as clearly. He was well lit and visible from the road at all times. He had thought about this in the early weeks of the job, and then stopped thinking about it, because there was nothing to be done about it. And thinking about it made the nights longer. Regular customers on the overnight were a predictable cast. The same truckers, the same insomniacs, the same young people coming from wherever young people in rural Vermont went at night. Noah knew them by order, if not by name. He knew the rhythms of the road outside, the long silences between 2 and 4 a.m., the light uptick around 5 when the earliest commuters and dairy farmers started moving. The first unusual night happened in January 2020. A slow Tuesday, deep cold outside, the road empty for long stretches. At 2:40 a.m., a car pulled into the parking lot. An older model sedan, dark-colored, parking in the far corner of the lot away from the lights. Noah watched it from behind the register. No one got out. The engine stayed running. He watched for 10 minutes. No movement from the car. He wrote it off as someone pulled over to check their phone or nap for a while and went back to his notebook. At 5:15 a.m., the car was still there, still running, still no movement visible through the parking lot. At 6 a.m., an hour before his shift ended, Noah called the non-emergency line and reported an idling vehicle that had been in his lot for over 3 hours. A cruiser came by 20 minutes later. The officer pulled alongside the car, got out, approached, and looked in the window. He came into the store afterward and told Noah the car was empty. Running, in park, heater on, but empty. No keys visible, no personal effects, no signs of anyone having recently been in it. He ran the plates. The car was registered to an address in Burlington, 2 hours north. The officer called it in and waited. Burlington police did a welfare check at the registered address. The owner of the car, a man in his 50s, was home. He said the car had been stolen from a parking garage 2 days earlier, and he had already filed a report that apparently had not been entered into the system yet. The car was towed. The case was closed as a stolen vehicle recovery. Noah watched the tow truck take it away and told himself that was the whole story. But he thought about it. An idling car with no one in it, sitting in a dark corner of a parking lot for over 3 hours in a Vermont January, the engine running, the heater on, as if someone had stepped out briefly and planned to return. As if someone had been sitting in it, warm, invisible, watching, and had left before the officer arrived. The second unusual night happened in March. It was a Thursday, around 3:30 a.m., the store empty and the road outside dark and quiet. Noah was reading behind the register when the bathroom door at the back of the store opened. He had not seen anyone go into the bathroom. The store had been empty since a trucker had left at 2:50, and he had watched the door since then, not consciously, but with the peripheral attention he maintained, without thinking about it, the automatic awareness of whether the store was empty or not that any overnight employee develops. The store had been empty. He had not unlocked the bathroom for anyone. The bathroom required a key that he kept behind the register and handed out on request. The door opened, and a woman walked out. Mid-40s, unremarkable appearance, wearing a winter coat and carrying a small bag. She walked from the back of the store to the front door without looking at Noah and pushed through it into the parking lot. He watched her through the window. She crossed the parking lot and got into a car he had not noticed, parked on the far side of the lot. Engine apparently already running, and drove away. Noah stood behind the register for a moment and then went to the bathroom. He knocked, got no answer, went in. The bathroom was cold, colder than it should have been given that someone had apparently just been in it, and dry and showed no signs of recent use. He checked under the sink, behind the door, everywhere a person could conceal themselves. Empty. He checked the small window above the toilet. It was latched from the inside, and the latch had paint over it that had not been disturbed. He went back to the register and looked at the security camera monitor behind the counter. The camera covered the register and the front half of the store. The back of the store, the aisle near the bathroom, was outside the camera's field. He rewound to 2:50 when the last customer had left. He watched the footage at double speed. For the 40 minutes between the trucker's departure and the bathroom door opening, no one entered the store. The front door did not open. No one passed through the register camera's field. The woman had been in the bathroom when the trucker left, or she had been somewhere in the back half of the store for at least 40 minutes, or she had not entered through the front door at all. Noah checked the stockroom. The stockroom had a fire exit, a heavy door with a push bar, alarmed, which set off a loud tone at the register if opened. He checked the alarm panel. No alarm had been triggered. He pushed the door open himself, and the alarm sounded immediately loud and unmistakable. He reset it and stood in the cold parking lot outside the back of the store and looked at the empty field behind the building. He called his manager at home. His manager, a tired man named Phil, who had owned the store for 20 years, listened to the description and said it was probably someone who had come in earlier that he hadn't noticed. Noah said he had been watching the door all night. Phil said maybe he had looked away. Noah said the bathroom key was still behind the register. Phil said the bathroom door lock was old and didn't always work properly. Noah quit the job 4 months later. He found an office job in Burlington and took it and moved north and did not work another overnight shift anywhere. He still has the notebook from that job, pages of notes and fragments of writing from those nights. He says sometimes he reads through it looking at the entries from that winter and trying to find the thing he missed. The explanation he did not think of at the time. He says he has not found it yet. He says the woman's face stays with him more than anything else. Not because it was frightening or strange, because it was completely ordinary. The face of a person doing something completely unremarkable. The face of a person walking out of a bathroom in a convenience store at 3:30 a.m. after 40 minutes in a locked room with no key, looking exactly like a person who had every right to be there and every expectation that no one would question it. He says that is the part that bothers him most, not the impossibility of it, the confidence of it. The security guard who stopped making his rounds. Location: Office Park, Charlotte, North Carolina, 2021. This story was told by a man named Anthony Green, 38, who worked as an overnight security guard at a multi-building office park in Charlotte, North Carolina, for 14 months between 2020 and 2021. The job was standard for the industry patrol. The buildings and parking areas on a rotating schedule, check doors and windows, log any anomalies, sit at the guard station between patrols, keep the radio on. Quiet, repetitive, occasionally lonely work that Anthony had taken because the hours fit around his day school schedule, and the pay was reasonable, and the buildings were modern and well lit, and the company that managed the park was professional. He worked with a partner on most nights, a rotating cast of co-workers, but there were occasional nights when staffing shortages left him alone, which was against company policy, but happened anyway the way things that are against company policy happen in understaffed industries. He had been alone several times without incident. He was a large, calm, physically capable man who had done construction security in his 20s and was not intimidated by empty buildings at 3 a.m. He began the job without unusual incident. The first 6 months were exactly what the job description had suggested: quiet, routine, occasionally tedious. He did his rounds, checked his doors, logged his notes, drank his coffee, listened to podcasts on his earbuds during the long patrol routes through the connected parking structures. The incidents began in the 7th month. The office park had 6 buildings, 2 larger main buildings flanking a central courtyard, and 4 smaller satellite buildings arranged around a perimeter road. Anthony's patrol route took him through all 6 buildings in a sequence he had memorized in his first week. He could do the full route in 32 minutes if he moved steadily and did not stop to investigate anything. Building 4 was the satellite building on the northeast corner of the park, a 3-story structure occupied by a single tenant, a financial services company, whose employees were never in the building before 8 a.m. It was the quietest of the 6 buildings, and the one Anthony liked least. He could not have said exactly why. The building was identical in construction to the others. The layout was the same. The light levels were the same. But it had a quality he noticed every time he entered it, a resistance, like trying to remember a word that stays just out of reach. He noticed it, and dismissed it, and did his checks, and moved on. In his 7th month, he began noticing that the 3rd floor of Building 4 smelled different from the rest of the building. Not a bad smell, not decay or chemicals, or anything alarming. A human smell. The particular combination of breath and skin and warmth that a room takes on when people have been spending time in it. The smell of occupancy. The 3rd floor of Building 4 was entirely vacant. The financial services tenant occupied floors 1 and 2. Floor 3 had been empty since Anthony started. No furniture, no equipment, bare floors, unoccupied offices with empty desks, and removed ceiling tiles stacked against walls. There was no reason for it to smell occupied. He checked it more carefully. He walked every office on the 3rd floor with his flashlight in addition to the ceiling lights. He checked closets. He checked the single bathroom. He checked the server room empty of servers. Door unlocked. Nothing inside. He found nothing. The smell was present throughout the entire floor and strongest in the large open workspace at the far end of the hall. And then it was simply there, and he could not find its source. He logged it as a possible HVAC issue air from the occupied floors being recirculated to the third, and noted it in his shift report. Facilities reviewed the HVAC and found nothing abnormal. 2 weeks later, he found the first sign. It was on his 3 a.m. patrol. He came out of the stairwell on the 3rd floor of Building 4 and turned on the lights and began his check. In the large open workspace at the far end, the room where the smell was strongest, he found a folding chair. Placed in the center of the room, facing the window that looked out over the parking lot and the courtyard, and Building 2 across the courtyard. Just a chair. The kind of basic folding chair that existed in every storage area of every building in the park. Anthony looked at the chair for a long moment. He checked the room. He checked the closets and the bathroom and the server room again. Empty. He picked up the chair and carried it to the storage area off the stairwell, where it presumably belonged, and put it with the other folding chairs stacked there. He counted them 6, which matched the count on the inventory sheet tacked to the storage room door. He logged the chair placement as a possible prank by facilities staff. A week later, the chair was back. Same position, center of the room, facing the window. Anthony stood in the doorway of the workspace and looked at it. It was 3:10 a.m. The room was empty. The chair was placed with the precision of something intentional, not dragged to a random spot, but centered in the room with its back aligned to the room's long axis and facing the window directly. He did not move it this time. He took a photograph with his phone and logged it, and went back to his patrol. The chair was in a different position the following night, still in the workspace, but moved, now angled slightly to the left, still facing the window, but from a different spot in the room, as if someone had sat in it and shifted it slightly over the course of a night. Anthony started checking the 3rd floor of Building 4 first, on every patrol before the rest of his route, rather than as part of the sequence. The chair moved every night. Small movements, precise adjustments, as if someone was spending time in it and getting comfortable and shifting position in the way that a person sitting in one spot for a long time inevitably shifts. On the night of the 4th week, he came onto the 3rd floor at 1:45 a.m., earlier than his usual 3 a.m. check, and the chair was warm. He put his hand on it, and the seat was warm, with the specific retained heat of a body that had been sitting in it recently. He stood up and looked at the room. He looked at the window. The window looked out over the courtyard and Building 2 directly across from it. The lights in Building 2 were on their automatic night setting, low ambient lighting throughout each floor, motion sensors that brought individual areas to full brightness when triggered. As Anthony stood at the window of Building 4's 3rd floor workspace, looking out at Building 2, the lights on Building 2's 3rd floor came to full brightness. Something had triggered the motion sensor on Building 2's 3rd floor. He called it into dispatch immediately and requested a patrol check of Building 2. His partner that night, a man named Carl who was covering the other half of the park, went to Building 2 and checked the 3rd floor. He found nothing. No one. No sign of entry, no open windows, no unlocked doors. The Building 2 3rd floor lights went back to ambient after 5 minutes. Carl went back to his patrol. Anthony stood at the window of Building 4 and looked across at Building 2's 3rd floor and thought about angles. The chair was positioned to look directly at Building 2's 3rd floor from Building 4's 3rd floor, at some point between 1:15 and 1:50. In the morning, when Anthony was elsewhere in the park doing his route, he requested a full security review of Building 2 the following morning. The former employee was contacted by HR at the financial services company. Anthony was shown the list. He looked at the dates. He had been working alone on 11 of those 23 nights. He gave his 2 weeks' notice the following day. His manager asked him why he was leaving. He has told this story several times, and the question he gets asked most often is what he thinks was happening, what the person in Building 2 was doing, why they came back 23 times over 7 months to sit in an empty room in the middle of the night and look out at Building 4. Anthony always gives the same answer. He says he does not know what they were watching in Building 4. He does not know what they were looking for, or whether they found it, or what they planned to do with whatever information 23 nights of 2 a.m. surveillance of an office park building had given them. He says there is only one thing he knows for certain. He knows that on at least 11 of those 23 nights, the nights he was working alone, whatever was in that room in Building 2 was watching him do his rounds, watching him move through the buildings, watching him in the parking lot, watching him from the dark 3rd floor of a building he had already checked and left. He says he has thought about those 11 nights many times, the routes he walked, the patterns he kept, the predictability of a security guard who does the same route in the same order at the same times every night. He thinks about how much someone could learn about a building and the person guarding it from 23 nights of 2 a.m. observation. He says he thinks about it, and then he stops thinking about it, because there is a point at which thinking about something like that stops being useful. And past that point, it is just the dark. If you work overnight, vary your routes, change your patterns, tell someone where you are, and trust the feeling that something in the building is not the same as it was an hour ago.